To glue these vertical rods into the fuselage, and those, as you can see from this other fin, you've got these screws, which is how they're gonna release the vertical stab or the rudder. So anyway, so what I've done here is inserted the rods to make sure I like how it fits. It looks like it doesn't quite fit, so we're gonna adjust the rods in the vertical stab. And then the other thing to note here is that we've drilled these holes in the bottom, so you can see there's a tiny little hole there and a tiny little hole here as well. And the goal of those holes is to allow the epoxy to drip out the bottom, because otherwise it's pretty airtight. So when we put epoxy in here to glue those vertical rods, there needs to be an exit hole for epoxy or air to come out so that the epoxy can fill out. What I want to show here is how I applied the glue. So previously, when I just had the glue in there, I stuck this in and the glue didn't quite get around every part, and so I just pulled this out and made sure that I applied glue evenly around, and we're going to stick it back in. Okay, so here we go. We're going to push this down and then we're going to clean the excess. I have a bottle of alcohol here, because the last thing we want is to glue the fin to the body. So okay, so we're going to clean that excess. Okay. That's going in pretty good. Just get my alcohol ready and just make sure that you don't have any residue. So now I'm happy with that. Just gonna make sure I clean my gloves as well so that I don't put epoxy on the plane. Push it down. And we're just cleaning the bottom here. Just making sure those holes are there so that the epoxy can leak out. And I need to hold this down. And that's it. Alright, so here's what the vertical stab looks like. Well, the rods that hold it in. So these are glued in, and you can see the screws that go in from sort of the inner sides of the vertical stab and how those look like. So now we're gonna go put servos in the vertical stab. For the manual, what I'm gonna go with is this 10mm low profile servo. And this is what I'm gonna use. This is what I have, these GDW servos, and here are the parameters. So the manual calls for a minimum of 70 plus newtons, sorry. This is 11 kilogram force, so that's at least 110 newtons, give or take. So these guys should be perfect for the job. The other thing that comes in the kit is your vertical fin pack, and in there we have the stuff that we can use to mount the servos. So we'll get that done and show you what that looks like. These are the two brackets that we have, and it looks like the one that fits my style of servo is this guy. So that's what we're gonna go ahead and mount internally. So it's gonna somehow get in there and sit in that way. So I have marked this line here, put this tape so that I can estimate a good straight line for the servo arm directly to the horn. Now, so as I showed earlier, I have a piece of tape with a line drawn. That way I can align my servo correctly, and the arm, everything will have the correct geometry. The other thing I wanted to point out is I couldn't figure out if there was a channel in here, so I just drilled one. You can see right in here. Just lift that up. I just drilled a hole. That's going to be for the servo wire, and that's going to be bringing that servo wire down to this point, at which point I also enlarged that. So there's a bunch of triangles just like that, and I cut that through, so the wire is going to come through here, and that's how it's going to get attached to the fuselage. This is the mount, and as you can see, I have cut this side, used to be symmetric, and the reason for that is because when the servo sits in the pocket here, if you look at how this is supposed to cover, right, you want the servo arm when it's neutral to sit right in the middle, right here, not too far out that way or too far this way, because your movement either way is going to be restricted. So when I put this in here, if I left this piece kind of the same that way, then what that meant is that the servo was sitting in here such that this arm would be further to this side. So this way, cut this, move this whole servo mount further in this way, and that way, because when you look at this is how the servo wants to sit. So the spline is on this end, which means, well, it's going to be on either end. The servo mounting needs to be further this way. If you put it in the middle, then you have your arm coming out closer to this end, then you'll have trouble moving that way. Anyway, so this is how it's gonna go in there, and then I'll just test fit it, and then I'll show you what that result looks like. We have the servo mounted. Obviously I pre-drilled the holes, drove the screws through them, brought them out, laced the holes with CA, and as you can see, I've also the edges here have CA in them. This one's more obvious. You can kind of see where the CA sat, just to strengthen the wood, and now that's not going anywhere. Next thing obviously was to find the correct arm, so I was able to find these metal arms. These are 5mm diameter and 25T, so those will fit in here perfectly, and if I use the outmost hole right there, then I do get the slightly over the 30mm of travel on the rudder that the CARF manual recommends. So that's what I'm going to use. So this right here is what I mean when I say you want the arm to be in the center of this cutting when the servo arm is neutral. So now you can see that I have equal amounts of travel on that side and on this side, so that my servo can move both ways. Otherwise, gluing this, I'm gonna make sure everything works. And again, remember, when I do this, I always make sure that the servo connection sits right in the pocket here, so that if you need to replace that, it's pretty easy to get to. Don't want to bury that in in here somewhere, and then you have to pull everything out. That's a no-go. Anyway, so now that that's that, and we've made a temporary plug for testing our servo, we're going to apply power, center everything, make sure that I like the alignment between the servo and the horn. Geometry is good when you're going to glue that and epoxy it and let it cure overnight. So I have the servo powered on, and I'm checking alignment, and it looks like geometry is perfect, exactly the way I want it. The gap in here is pretty good. I'll have enough room this way in front of the servo arm as well. So I'm liking that, so we're going to glue that and let that be the final position for the rudder servo. Like that, the rudder is finished. So measuring from the base of the rudder here, I get about 35mm deflection, which is 5mm more than what the manual calls for, so I'm happy with that result. The wiring now, and so first thing I'm going to do is show the rudder, and you can see that I 3D printed a base plate, and we're using this connector, which is a locking connector. I don't know what the name is, but I'm using one that has got 7 pins just because I may decide to add lights later to the vertical stab. So that's what these extra connections are going to be for. But wiring is pretty simple. Basically just created the wire pins, put them in the connector, drilled a hole through the surface and dropped the wires in, and you can see them right in here. So the power box, red, white, blue, that's the rudder wire, and then you can see here we have the other wire, which is the elevator stabilator. And this is going to be a little bit trickier to show, but you can see that basically the servo's back here, and all the wiring goes in through, there's a pocket right behind here, so you can kind of see that spot over there, which is open. So all the wiring will go in through there, and you can see comes out the bottom there, and it's going to get routed over that former there, and then routed forward, and I'll show you what that looks like. Here's the mating side of the vertical stab connector, and you can see very simple, just some snake skin to protect the wires from chafing, because these are pretty sharp, so the formers here have been cut pretty sharp, and you can see how I cleared some of that off so that that connector will fit. And I cleared actually 2 levels. You can see this one and the one below it, just because of the height of this connector once it's plugged in, so that it doesn't pinch any wires. And that's pretty much it.